Debate an exclusive look in at Syria with the offensive on the restive city of Homs after the Russians and Chinese blocked a watered-down resolution at the UN. The outside world is scrambling for a plan to pressure the regime of Bashar al-Assad. The West is working on sanctions, Turkey's working on hosting a conference, and on Tuesday, the opposition's Syrian National Council called on Syrian businessmen abroad to fund and arm the insurgency. Is that a good idea? What is the so-called Syrian Free Army? A mere brand name that's popped up as the nation descends closer into civil war, or a bona fide fighting force? Guardian reporter and photographer Gaït Abdullahad was in northern Syria a short while ago last month and met some of these fighters. He joins us from Istanbul, and with us in the studio, Anna Nestat of Human Rights Watch, thank you for being with us, and Régis Le Sommier of Paris Match will be looking at the situation as you've been discussing it on the France 24 Debate Facebook page and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrançoisF24. But we begin with a report that we mentioned, Adel Gastel and Karim Hakiki going into Syria with the insurgency for reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine.
The flag of independence flies above the streets of Binish. The city's residents have struggled free of Damascus's influence. Now, more than 1,000 members of an insurgent army protect the people and their hard-won freedoms. At the gates of the town, battles are fought against the regime every day. But inside, soldiers of the uprising are in charge. To get to Binish, our team had to smuggle themselves into Syria, crossing mountains and military checkpoints before finally reaching this defiant community. Kamel spent all night out on the roof. He's a new recruit to the Free Syrian Army, or FSA.
Saman, do you hear that?
Just 22, he acts as the town sheriff. He had been a regime soldier, but ended up here when he deserted, refusing to follow orders to fire upon protest crowds. We stick with him as he heads out on patrol.
The Free Syrian Army defends the city and its surroundings. Our main task is to protect the people who demonstrate every day to bring down the murderous regime of Bashar al-Assad.
He takes a moment to show us traces of the last street battles. Syrian soldiers targeted civilians. Since then, an odd calm masks a permanently tense atmosphere. Around 20 people were killed in clashes between the FSA and the regime's forces. This grandmother invites us in to show us the damage caused to her home.
We were hidden inside when shells started raining down on us, from about 8 in the evening until 3 in the morning. Then the soldiers came into the house looking for guns. But we don't even have a kitchen knife.
The patrol continues and we head into the city centre. Kamel shows us the neighbourhood around the Grand Mosque. It's also been hit hard by security forces.
Look, bullet holes. They shoot everything that moves. If you put your head out the window, snipers will kill you.
Insurgents have managed to keep tight control of the city since last July. We operated under their protection, but also under their control, without any direct access to the population. Things are tough. The area of Jebel el-Zawiya is almost totally out of supplies. Only a few truckloads of flour make it through. In Binish, the cost of freedom is high. It's constantly besieged, always in the sight of a network of regime tanks. But the internet eases the isolation. Now a cyber activist, Badr used to be a teacher. To post videos of demonstrations online, he's got to outwit the authorities.
This equipment is our only link to the outside world. It's what allows us to have our voices heard. It has the same value as a human life because it transmits to the outside what's happening in here. Yes, it's a real weapon. Bashar al-Assad led a campaign against us, claiming that we were terrorists armed with modern weapons and acting against the regime.
As night approaches, Badr prepares for protests. The rallies have become a daily ritual, a way for the resistance to mark out its territory and stake its fragile claim to independence. We will resist until the fall of the regime is the latest slogan. Recording from above, Badr rebroadcasts the demonstration online.
We want freedom, democracy, the end of the regime, and the execution of the president.
We all have a problem with Bashar al-Assad because he's been unjust to his people since the beginning of his rule. He's a despot who squandered the country's resources. We asked him for freedom, and he responded with machine guns.
The rebels are everywhere. They organize and oversee all of the demonstrations. They're also always ready to fight. A deserted farmhouse to the north of Binish serves as one of the FSA's advanced positions.
If the tanks come, we'll see them over there.
The Syrian army is positioned in front less than 3 kilometers away.
Those who are here are enough, but it would be better to have reinforcements. We call on all our brothers in the Syrian army to leave Assad and a regime which hasn't spared women or children.
Inside, fighters clean their guns. A handful of men from this Katiba, or revolutionary brigade, sit and drink tea, waiting to go to war. They have their own code of combat.
We, the Free Army, are ready to protect the region honorably and humanely. We won't attack any soldier just because he is Syrian. Meanwhile, the system hunts down deserters, imprisons their families, and destroys their homes.
For now, the FSA is made up of disparate groups of men hoping to see a no-fly zone brought in. The next day, Badr takes us to hospital. It's struggling to cope. Insurgents control the city but haven't been able to secure the hospital. We're forced to go round the back in order not to be discovered.
Where's the surgery's hidden door?
Badr is tense.
We are forced to hide ourselves and come in through the back door. If we come in through the main door, we risk arousing suspicion. There are spies everywhere.
The doctor's taking a huge risk by meeting with us and doesn't want to show his face. He treats the injured in secret. This man was at home when he was hit in his pelvis by shrapnel.
In 90% of cases, the injuries have nothing to do with the resistance, the demonstrations, or the revolutionaries. Most of the time, there are people who are hit by shells at home or in their car or in their shops. It doesn't stop me fulfilling my responsibilities. I'm a doctor. I look after the injured, whatever the consequences.
The hospital's regularly targeted by snipers. Even the windows in the recovery room have been blown out. So even the wounded often stay away. Ahmed died because his family couldn't get him to hospital. It was just too dangerous.
They brought him home, but we couldn't help him. He's dead. I wanted to go out even during the shelling to rescue him, but they told me that was impossible. There wasn't even any cotton wool or syringes. If the regime finds even the smallest syringe at our house, they'll accuse us of helping terrorists.
Ahmed left behind 2 children, and his parents are devastated.
I'll visit my son's tomb every day, and I'll pray for his soul at the cemetery.
It's a problem faced by a poor but determined resistance. In Binish, as elsewhere, they can't do much to stop the dying and the killing. The Free Syrian Army lacks men, resources, ammunition, everything really. Back at the revolutionaries' headquarters, there's a meeting tonight. It's at the home of a rich businessman who's put money towards the rebellion, and the FSA reports back to him. Our presence is barely tolerated. The captain's pleased to announce a few spoils of war, 5 regime militiamen who've just been arrested.
There are people in the region and others who come from elsewhere. They are members of a political party that's supported by Lebanon. This party's linked to Hezbollah. 90% of those we arrest eventually join the cause of the Free Army.
Later, the captain said that the remaining 10% are summarily tried and executed. Freedom fighters in the FSA say that they have around 20,000 men. It's a number that's impossible to verify.
We negotiate directly with the army, man to man. Otherwise, we speak on the phone. We even have moles in their homes. It's no surprise because they are brothers that we know well. We are in constant contact.
The stronghold of Binish isn't a priority in Bashar al-Assad's fight back against the uprising. But that could change at any moment.
All right, and with the focus this week being on the constant barrage of shelling that we've seen on the city of Homs, that report taking you there to northern Syria. If you missed part of it, you can catch it in Reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine. Now, the France 24 journalists Karim Hakiki and Adel Gastel, who compiled that report, met Gaït Abdulahad on their way in. Gaït, when we watch that report, so many questions come to mind, and I guess the first one that comes to my mind seeing that report is, who, again, are these fighters? Is it the same situation as in Libya, where they're just ordinary civilians who've picked up weapons? Are they army deserters? Who are these guys?
Of course, some of them are army deserters. They kind of joined the revolution in the later days, but I met some of those guys when I was in Binish. Most of those guys are civilians, civilians who are very scared of the oppression of the regime. When I was in Binish 2-3 months ago, one day the army was about to enter the town, and you see all the villagers carrying guns, carrying weapons, and going to face the army. And I was asking one of the guys, so what? So what's next? What's plan B? You have less than 60 bullets. What are you going to do when the army enters? And he says, I don't know. I'm willing to die, just not to be arrested by the army. And this is not the rhetorical, I want to be a martyr, I want to die. It's just the pure fear of the torture of the regime that people are willing to die facing the regime than be arrested. So yes, it's very similar to Libya. They are farmers, they are students, teachers, and of course some army defectors. But the main point is they are, part of the population.
Régis Le Sommier, a constant climate of fear.
Well, obviously, in many parts, there's been, there's a situation that was created where you see some zones that are entirely almost controlled by the rebels, and on the outskirts of the town you have, like we saw, the army waiting possibly to move in. Obviously, that's what they did at Homs, because I believe they reach the center of town at some points during the week. So there is probably a sense in like these people are going to go towards a desperate fight, and but also we have to remain how fractious the Syrian society is, and how part of the countries are in rebellion and parts are not in rebellion. We've heard about some suburbs of Damascus, but the whole town of Damascus has remained relatively quiet, and other places in Syria as well. So it's if we could call it going to a civil war. It seems that's definitely what we're heading to.
And Anistat, when you watched that report, there was at one point the line that the rebels are everywhere, and yet at the same time there's a sort of a general sense of helplessness.
I think the sense of helplessness is definitely there. The rebels are not everywhere. They're in some areas, some parts, and as we could see over the last week, even the parts that they control, it's a very fragile control. They cannot do much against the government artillery, and that's exactly the tactics that the government has been using in Homs. They did not come in to have street fighting with these rebels, with the FSA. They started bombarding the entire town using long-range artillery, which leads obviously to multiple casualties. So I think I don't have a sense that FSA is well organized, with the exception of just a few neighborhoods where there seems to be some organization, or well equipped for that matter, and so helpless partially describes what they are.
Did you have a sense when you were there, Gaït Abdulahad, that there was what kind of level of organization was there?
I mean, I would like to really agree with your two guests. It's, I mean, in a way, they are disorganized. We cannot talk about a general structure as much as the FSA would like to talk about, a leadership and a structure. There is no structure. There is no coordination, for example, between Binnish and the villages next door. I mean, of course, there is some coordination over the phone, but there is no general higher command that controls all the units of the FSA. It's a really village-based, town-based, neighborhood-based, and every neighborhood, I mean, partly this is their strength. Every neighborhood is defending itself. I would really think, of course, Syria is not Iraq, Iraq is not Libya, but it's very similar to an insurgency, to a countryside insurgency. So the FSA or the insurgents, whatever you want to call them, control a neighborhood, control the countryside. When the tanks pass, they disappear. When the tanks disappear, they come back
reappear.
And they control the neighborhood.
We're going to pick up on that point. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.